But let's go back to last night and the football. Daniel Harris joins us this morning. Let's talk about Rafa Benitez because what he managed to do and what he's managing to do at Newcastle is fairly unparalleled as far as I can see in football history, where he's managing to shield one of the most repugnant ownership groups. Well, actually, no, now that I think about it, Alex Ferguson did exactly the same thing for a long period of time, where he managed to make everybody believe that supporting a football team was about supporting the team and the manager, as opposed to actually, helping the evil empire to continue. So, fair play to Rafa Benitez is the short way of me trying to say what I'm saying.
Yeah, he's doing an amazing job. I don't think that anyone really thinks Newcastle would have stayed up last season if it wasn't for him. And similarly, they've got a really good chance of staying up this season again, partly because there are three teams that might be worse, but primarily because he's a good manager and Newcastle are below his standard of manager in terms of the way that they're prepared to go about being a football club. Of course, Newcastle are a great, famous old football club, so I don't say that to insult Newcastle and call them a small club or anything like that, but the ambition of their owner is small, and he's very lucky to have a manager of the calibre of Benitez. And we saw that again yesterday. To come back from a goal down against Manchester City and win the game is phenomenal.
I suspect you were probably watching the Man United game, but is there a template that Newcastle have shown the rest of the Premier League here when it comes to playing against City? It was it was a bank of five, a bank of four, and then a lone striker. And they did go goal down really early, which normally the lesser team kind of says, okay, well, that's fair enough, you've scored, that's the game over from our perspective.
I think that rather than there being a pro forma for beating City, I think what we're seeing actually is City not beating themselves. But if you look at the games they've lost this season, look at the game they lost to Chelsea. They played pretty well in the first half, but they were playing. They forgot they're in a match. They were just playing a game. They forgot they're in a match, and they ended up conceding. When they lost to Palace, when they lost to Leicester, when they lost last night, they lost from a goal up. And that tells you that something is not right there. City are much too good to be doing that. And it suggests that mentally, I don't know if they think they're better than they are. I don't know if they're taking liberties in the way that they're playing. I sort of did feel that against Chelsea, where Guardiola didn't pick a centre forward, even though he had one on the bench. And he just thought that City would play nicely and eventually the goals would come. And City played like that, and they got caught. And I think that is what we're seeing, that they look to me like a team that is believing their own publicity, that is believing that they're better than they are. And what really happened was last season, everything went in their favour. And that's not to say they weren't brilliantly prepared, and Guardiola's not a brilliant manager, and they don't have brilliant players. But time after time after time, when it comes on top, they are weak. We saw it against Liverpool in the Champions League. We saw it against United when they could have won the league against their local rivals. And it's looking like we're going to see it again. They shouldn't be 7 points if Liverpool win tonight. They'll be 7 points behind. They're not 7 points worse than Liverpool in terms of the quality of what they are, but in terms of the mentality, that is clearly exactly where they deserve to be, because there's a handry metric for determining where teams deserve to be in the league table, and it's called the league table, and that is where they are.
I think you're definitely onto something there, and I do wonder if Pep Guardiola and his relationship with perfection is actually a damaging thing for someone like Manchester City. That you look at the couple of games they lost over Christmas, the Andros Townsend goal, the Ricardo Pereira goal, two ridiculous strikes really that ordinarily don't happen in sport, but it seemed to kind of knock City back a little bit. The Salman Rondon goal last night was relatively bizarre as well. He could have ballooned that ball anywhere. Who knows what would have happened? And it seems that when that one moment of imperfection, i.e. conceding a goal that they perhaps shouldn't concede, seeps in, it kind of creates a sense of crisis within this Manchester City team, that they hold themselves to an impossible standard, which is ultimately resulting in bad results.
Yeah, I mean, when you're seeking perfection rather than seeking to win, then when not everything is according to plan, then sometimes that can be a problem. And I think that's what we're seeing. If they've forgotten how to find a way to win. And last season, they were never really playing under pressure because no team was able to stay with them. They set such a pace from the beginning of the season, they didn't play under pressure. And once you're playing under pressure, as they are now, because Liverpool have put them under pressure, you're not going to achieve perfection. And you're going to need to hang in there, and you're going to need to play with intensity, and you're going to need to find the way. And Newcastle needed the points. They played with intensity. They had a plan, and clearly City weren't good enough to get beyond that, because talent won't always do it for you. You need more than talent. You need application. You need belief. You need mentality. And for City to lose the games that they're losing from a goal up just suggests that all is not well there.
So how do you fix that? And who do you blame?
It's not so much a matter of apportioning blame, because generally when things go wrong in any walk of life, in anything, there'll be numerous people who were at fault, and also you have to give credit to their opponents. But I guess the way it works in football and in team sports is that you blame the manager because he sends the players out to play, and he's sending them out with a particular mentality, and he also has the opportunity to change things, and he wasn't able to do that. But at the same time, the players hit certain levels last season, and they're not hitting them this season, and they're all responsible. Each one of them is responsible for performing to that level. And I think what City lack is they're lack bastards. And I think we've said this before, that people that stop bad circumstances becoming terrible circumstances. People that make sure that if you have a bad 20 minutes, you still get out of it 0-0 or 1-0. And City don't really have that. And Pep Guardiola's first team at Barcelona, they did have that. They had Puyol, they had Busquets. At Bayern Munich, he did an amazing job at Bayern Munich, but at the same time, there wasn't a lot of competition. And throughout his career, look at how he responded when Mourinho put him under pressure. And it wasn't very pleasant pressure. The way that Mourinho behaved wasn't nice, it wasn't gentlemanly, but Guardiola didn't respond particularly well to the kind of pressure that Mourinho put him under either. And it's not to say that Pep Guardiola is not a great football manager, because demonstrably he is. But the majority of his great achievements have come with circumstances that have been more or less perfect. And when they haven't been perfect, so like when Bayern Munich got done by Atletico in the Champions League, when they got done by Madrid in the Champions League, they haven't found a way. When City got done by Liverpool in the Champions League, they haven't hung in there. They haven't found a way to get it done. And it's a problem that keeps reoccurring, which suggests that it's a pattern rather than a coincidence.
Yeah, okay. Owen, we were talking about this a little bit earlier on, and it felt like we were asking the question about signings. If there were any bastards out there that he could get his hands on in the next 24 hours, then now would be the time to do it.
Well, yeah, ready-made bastard. I'm not sure how many of them there are out there, and somebody who can also slot into a Pep Guardiola side that isn't exactly... I'm not sure it's an easy thing for any footballer, despite your ability to actually just slip on into. They play with a specific style of play. The same goes for Liverpool at the moment, and it is on vogue at the moment in terms of high pressing, in terms of your ability without the ball, whatever it might be. I'm just not sure, regardless of the qualities that you have, that you're able to just slip into a Pep Guardiola side. And I think because of the cult of the manager now, I think that's half the reason why we've seen the January transfer window kind of fade into irrelevance. That mid-season signings just haven't been successful in recent years.
Yeah, I don't know. Daniel, if there was a ready-made bastard out there that Man City could hire in the next 24 hours, it's probably worth it for their league title aspirations. It might be somebody who could potentially not be available to them in Europe, or might be, who knows. But you've got to try and do something to inject a bit of bastardry into the team, right?
Yeah, I think so. And it's really, if Liverpool win tonight, they're 7 points behind. That's not an insurmountable gap, although they do have the problem of they don't get to sort Liverpool themselves again. But 7 points isn't insurmountable, but you look at City and you think, do they have the nastiness, the cruelty, the bloody-mindedness to hang in there and wait for Liverpool to falter? Because Liverpool, for whatever Jurgen Klopp's trying to say, they're under a phenomenal amount of pressure. They've not won the league in 29 years. And this is an amazing chance for them now. If City can stick with them, and City are there for when Liverpool don't win a game, and Liverpool aren't going to win every game between now and the end of the season. If City are there, then City can make hay when that happens. But they don't have the demeanour of a team that is going to stick it out until that point. And I'm not sure that the signing of one player is going to do anything about that. What we're really seeing from Liverpool is what we saw from City last season. They're not as devastating as City, and they're not as good as City, but more or less everything is going in their favour at the moment. So they hit a hot streak when City were without David Silva, Fernandinho and De Bruyne all at the same time. And that was what enabled them to establish their lead. They haven't really had as many. They had a few injuries in defence, but they weren't playing anyone particularly good at the time of those injuries. And the bounce of the ball, the seeing them given penalties they're getting, and things are going in Liverpool's favour. But if City are able to put them under pressure, that won't necessarily continue for the rest of the season, in the same way City wouldn't have necessarily been able to keep going like that last season, except there was no one good enough to actually stoke up the pressure on them. And if City are able to do that, Liverpool will falter. They might not falter enough, but they won't win every game. it's just very hard to see City doing that, particularly once Champions League starts again, because they're going to be looking at it and thinking, well, let's try and do that instead.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. I should talk to you briefly about Man United's performance last night. Reading your tweets, the best part about the evening was the fact that there was definitely a throwback to happier times when Manchester United would find themselves in a hole and the rest of the world would be like, oh, we're going to start watching this now just to make sure that I don't miss one of the remarkable comebacks. So there's a bit of the magic there from what happened last night, but there's also still a sense that they don't quite have the depth of squad for Solskjaer to be able to actually pick not his strongest team.
He can rotate, because we saw it at Arsenal on Friday, but I felt like he took one liberty too many, and not playing Pereira, who is a young kid, and he was giving him an opportunity in a game that United would expect to win. But the front three was a Mourinho front three, and United looked more like scoring than they did under Mourinho, because they were getting men in the box. In the end, it was probably one change too many, so that Lukaku wasn't going to play, Martial was, but then Martial got injured in training. But then at that point, you have to think about trying to have as many of that front three that works, Lingard, Martial, Rashford, as you can. And what he did was he brought Mata in for Lingard. That was a fair change to make, but you can't then move Rashford out to the left as well. I thought it would have made more sense to play Rashford through the middle and play Sanchez than it made to play Lukaku. And we saw that. But what we also saw was what happens when you put teams under pressure from the beginning. So although United didn't make very many clear chances in the game, Burnley had to spend pretty much all of the game defending. And when it comes to the last 10 minutes and minds are tired and bodies are tired, you see mistakes like the one Jeff Hendrick made when he fouled Jesse Lingard. He didn't need to make that foul, but the amount of pressure he'd been put under over the course of the game, the amount of running he'd done, the amount of concentrating he'd had to do, leads players to panic. And that's why United got a penalty when, to me, they didn't particularly look like they were going to score. It looked like they'd run out of ideas, but they kept at it. And that was something that's different. And that was often the way that it happened under Fergie. They might have the opponent on the rack, but they wouldn't necessarily be creating chance after chance. But the hard work, the graft that they put in the early part of the game, paid them out in the end in terms of an error. And then once they got the first goal, it did look quite a lot like they were going to get the second goal. And another 5 minutes, and they probably got the third goal. But it's weird, because although Solskjaer made a mistake, I felt, in the selection, he ends up coming up smelling of roses again, because they managed to find a way to get a point. And if they can beat Leicester at the weekend and City beat Arsenal, then that point will be the point that lifts them a space in the table. So it still worked out quite well, because people are asking, well, United haven't even been behind yet under Solskjaer. What are they going to do when they're behind? And we saw an emphatic answer to that. And slowly, one by one, I was very circumspect when he got the job, much as I wanted him to do it and much as I felt he had a lot of the qualities that would make the job work. But one by one, he's ticking off all the questions that you might have against him. And I actually think now he's probably the favourite for that job, and things would have to go quite wrong for him not to wind up getting it.
When you look back at the great Man United teams that Ferguson built, he always had a central midfielder who was capable, or a pair of central midfielders who were capable of dictating the pace. And at the moment, it doesn't really look like this team is built. It clearly isn't built the same way. It was never intended to be built the same way, because that's not how Mourinho wanted his teams to play. But I don't know if it's an assumption correct or not, but you would think that Solskjaer does want to get back to being able to control the pace of games, and that would suggest that they will be in the market for central midfielders of that type. Am I right about that? Is he inheriting that philosophy down to trying to create and buy midfielders like Carrick, like Scholes, like Keane in particular?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The forward line is good enough to cause any team in the world trouble, but the midfield isn't good enough to protect the defence, and the defence isn't good enough to protect the goalkeeper. And so United are always going to struggle to control the game against a properly good standard of opposition. So it's frustrating that that Solskjaer's not been given some money to spend right now, because United have got PSG, who are an excellent team, who are better than United, but they're not unbeatable. And particularly if Neymar misses both legs, then of that game, then you've actually got quite a good situation in that you can cater for Mbappe. Obviously, he might do something that you can't stop, but they've got one extremely dangerous player in Mbappe, and it's very different if they've got two extremely dangerous players, one on each wing. United don't have any combination of players in midfield that can do anything about that. But if you're looking to stop Mbappe, then that is possible. And for United not to try and find an upgrade on Herrera, an upgrade on Matic, or an upgrade on Phil Jones is frustrating, because of the momentum that they have now, the form that they're in. And there are plenty of players in world football that United could buy who would improve their midfield, who United could pay enough money to attract. But it's clearly it doesn't look like it's going to happen. But I'm sure that if Solskjaer stays on, and even if he doesn't, United will hire someone who understands the way that United should play and the way that the best teams play nowadays, and they will go and buy the kind of midfield player who can help you control the game. As I said, an upgrade on Matic, an upgrade on Herrera, or both.